to announce that Ms. Trichardt has joined this particular
Awesome.
session. Ms.
Thank
Trichardt,
you.
up to you, please, could you show your face and just acknowledge that you can hear us? That would be great to see that you're actually well connected, etc. Over to you.
Okay, so I'm not going to elaborate to this audience overly much about the problems in education and mathematics education. I think this audience is particularly aware of why we want to do things to help our learners do better at maths. And, you know, so the reason for the existence of a lot of NGOs and initiatives is really because we know that our mathematics learners are doing so poorly. But sometimes we just want to know, are we making a difference? And it is great if we can follow some data and some results to determine if we're actually making a difference. So just before I show you some results, that's quite heartening, just a quick detour in terms of non-routine mathematic problems, which is specifically what we looked at in this case, which is also those creative problem solving or non-routine problems, which requires creativity and you're thinking out of the box. So this is the type of mathematical questions that are part of the South African Mathematics Challenge. And this is particularly an evaluation that we did focusing on the primary school learners who participate in this South African Mathematics Challenge. And this Mathematics Challenge, as we said, is just sort of very much focused on those non-routine mathematic problems. So as part of the broader evaluation, we looked at existing data that the challenge collects year on year. We also conducted some stakeholder interviews, we did teacher interviews, and we discussed the challenge with learners and their experience. And it was a three-way exercise between myself, the South African Mathematics Foundation, and the Xenix Foundation, who sponsored the evaluation. But today, I'll just specifically focus quickly on the data that we analyzed that the South African Mathematics Challenge collected, or the South African Mathematics Foundation collected from 2017 to 2020. So this is data that's collected as a standard part of every evaluation, every year of competition. You would collect the learners who participate, the schools who participate, and we were able to calculate a profile for schools and look at their participation trends. And we were able to look at the percentage pass rates per school year on year. So firstly, we look at what we use the data. We grouped the data into three categories. We looked at schools who participate regularly, schools who participate on and off, and then schools who only participate once off. So really what I did here is I took a 3 or a 4 year data, and if a school didn't participate again, let's say the starting point was 2017, and they didn't participate again, they would be a once off. If they participated in at least 3 of the 4 years following, they would be regulars. And sometimes schools participate, then they would drop off, then they would participate again. And these sort of schools would then be classified as on and off. So it's very important, I think, that we look at the results for regulars, on and off, and once off schools. So this is where it starts becoming interesting. If we now compare the average pass in the second round of the competition, so the second round of the competition is more a test type environment. The first round is done at schools and marked by the teacher, and the second round is actually marked by the South African Mathematics Foundation. So if we look at this graph in front of us, we see that the regulars, who are the green bars, they have a higher average percentage pass rate in the second round. This is split by quintile 1 to 3 schools, quintile 4, quintile 5, and private schools. So quintile 5 and private schools do very much similarly, irrespective of whether they're regulars or only once off. But it is in the quintile 1 to 3 and the quintile 4 school space where we see that if you are a regular participating school in the challenge, then your pass rate is higher on the second round. So, and by quintile 4, we see a very large jump to almost the same levels as quintile 5 in private schools. And even in quintile 1 to 3 schools, this is almost double, at least double that of the other groups. But another way of looking at it, which also supports the assumption that regular participation in a challenge helps learners do better at the math, at non-routine mathematics, is if we look at the data year on year. So let's say on this graph, we've got grade 4s in the green bar, grade 5s in the purple bar, and grade 6 in the yellow bars. Now, there's a slight assumption that the same learners from grade 4 write the challenge again in grade 5, write the challenge again in grade 6. But this assumption is fairly much supported by the qualitative research, where we've spoken to schools and they say that it is the same learners who are enrolled every year. In the private schools, it tends to be all the learners who participate. And in lower quintile schools, they choose a set of learners who do particularly well or have potential, and they follow those learners through from grade 4, 5, and 6. So if we look at the regulars, we're making the assumption that it's the same learners, grade 4, 5, and grade 6. Then we can see that grade 4, 5, and 6, the pass rate on the second round just increases and increases and increases. And this is true for quintile 4 and quintile 5 schools for regulars. If we look at the non-regular schools, those are schools where we've got the on and offs or the once-offs. There's no such trend visible. So this seems to support the assumption that if we give learners an opportunity year on year and year to practice and engage in this type of mathematics, they are able to score better because, the challenge papers are like test papers, and we use that to measure how well they understand the topic. So this for me says that regular participation means that there's more exposure for learners, and this also means that teachers are more exposed to this type of this type of mathematical problem. So they get to learn how to teach this particular, much better. They become familiar with the subject matter, and they can then pass this on to other learners as well. I think this is actually, okay, well, one more slide. So what can we do? Why do schools participate regularly versus not so regularly? So from the qualitative research, it showed me that some schools use it just as a benchmark. So they want to see how well they do versus other learners. And when they then fail or struggle or it's not as easy, they give up, especially in the lower quintile schools. So they just get discouraged by failure. And it does add to the workload of teachers because it's an extracurricular activity. And they want to boast about it, and then if they don't do well, they do not want to do it again. So if schools do not understand the value of repeat participation for their learners as an academic exercise, sometimes that will definitely lead to them not participating again. Or only on and off every few years, but we really lose the value if we don't participate every year, year on year, and give those same learners opportunity to practice. Okay, that is me. I think I have not gone over time. I couldn't see my time on the...
No, Monica, you're good. Thank you very much. There's some comments from Greg Becker, who has given a URL where there's some online tools for mathematics competition in preparation and practice and training, and a platform that could be easily extended. I'm quite sure that the organizers are also recording the chat boxes because there are some extremely useful information also in the chat box as well. I actually want to ask both speakers just a question from my own. Now, I get a sense that we're actually not talking about the elephant in the room, especially if we talk about MOOCs and accessibility and online availability, etc. And that is the connectivity, especially in low resource schools. What do you find and what do you suggest then for teachers and for schools is to perhaps up the connectivity within these schools to facilitate the participation of learners in the world of online, especially in our COVID-19 pandemic, where we have to limit our actual physical presence in dealing with learners and even between learners and teachers, and for continued support to these learners. Do any of the two speakers would like to give it a go? Monica?
Yes, what I can add to that is that during the evaluation of the challenge, a lot of schools dropped out at the stage where they needed to use the post office to get the papers back, because our post offices are just not reliable. And also, if you use you map the schools who participate regularly to the post offices, which I'll show in a presentation tomorrow, how we can geo-map where our schools are to other places. Those who participate less regularly are the ones who haven't got access to post offices. So if those sort of schools had a different way of accessing and engaging with the challenge, they would definitely benefit from it.
Yes, thank you, Monica. I can confirm, that to rely on the post office is quite tricky. Even just by sending out a magazine, and schools don't have access to their post boxes any longer because of various reasons, which I don't want to elaborate on. But then again, it sort of signals a particular need, and that is for all the stakeholders involved in sending and posting things, and in order to reach out to schools, is that maybe we could perhaps have a think tank on how can we actually address that, because that also impedes on the accessibility. Dr. Gous, do you want to actually comment perhaps on the actual access, internet access of learners and schools to having access to MOOCs, for instance?
Yeah, so thanks, Susan. So part of the design of books is to make it accessible and, as Dorothy says, user-friendly. So we are very aware that maybe not everybody has access for long periods of time. So then you can download a video, but it must be short, and you can download PDF documents so that it's available. So we do not have to rely on the post office for delivery. That is part of the design of the MOOC, to adapt to different data opportunities. We have got a lot of literature on that, and so that is also part of this evolving thing, to address the real needs of maybe something that does work or doesn't work, or maybe we can make it work a little better. So one of the things we had, one of the challenges we found with the MOOCs is that there needed to be discussion. There needed to be online discussion. So then we created an online discussion community, and we had sessions every afternoon, because in COVID we couldn't go anywhere and we couldn't really meet, so we met online. Then part of the challenge of that was that some members didn't have connectivity at that particular time, so then we have recordings. So now we have recordings which kind of enhance the online discussions, which then in turn enhance the MOOC participation. So I think in the time that we're living now, there's not one answer, but we need to be open to being flexible and just try something. Every problem has at least one solution, but that doesn't mean that there's only one solution. So I'm open to trying something, to pilot something and just see whether it works. Connectivity, access, are top of the list though. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I have a last question here from Xavier Lawrence. Thank you, Xavier. Is there differentiation between access and quality of teaching? How can participation in the program benefit schools to identify areas of potential improvement so that it becomes a constructive tool rather than a report on participation? I assume, Monica, that this one's specifically for you then?
It is. Okay, so I mean, the schools get a report on how well their students do in the challenge. So it is not necessarily a report on participation, but a report on the pass rate, or even the number of students who get a gold versus so you can get an average score as well for your learners. What I find is the data that people have for their challenges or their Olympiads or their programs, they record that data in the background, but often they don't do enough with that, share that back to the schools. And, if we talk about a challenge like the South African Mathematics Challenge that we looked at, very often the lower quintile schools do no teaching, and they'll admit that. They just give the paper to the learners to do, because it's an extracurricular activity. So those schools don't even realize that they can prepare their kids for that. They think it's a benchmark exercise and they must give it to them cold. In the quintile 5 schools, private schools, they use this as a teaching tool throughout the year. In fact, they download those papers and use it throughout the year as a teaching tool. So I think there's a lot we can do to tell schools why they should participate regularly, what they should do before and after in terms of teaching, and where they can find the material. So I think those are the opportunities. And I think the challenges, Olympiads, we can do more with our data, and we can actually mine it more. And there's some gold there that we can find if we start looking at the right places.
Thank you for that last remark, Monica. I agree with you. There's some gold there. There's some low-hanging fruits there, which are, in a sense, pretty easy to actually deal with and to address. Because I think the feedback is very important for both teachers and principals of schools, even to use it as evaluation method, how the schools are faring, and then for the learners as well in preparation for not only for the program that you are offering, but also in preparing them for examination right through the year. So
if I can just also add, Monica, I think also for too long, all these Olympiads and competitions have been considered for the clever kids in the class, only for them, and they can get on and do it. That is not what the focus should be. It should be participation for all learners. We need to make it possible for all learners to participate. And I really think if we're going to, we need to, this is part of also the transformation. There needs to be inclusivity. Everybody should be able to participate, and that is really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
I just want to comment on that, if I have a moment. It is definitely an aim that we want everyone to participate, but during the evaluation, what emerged strongly was the language barrier. And in lower quintile schools, and even up to quintile 4 schools, English and language is just a barrier to doing maths. So they don't want to read those long, word problems and things. So basically, they select learners that they know can read well and do maths. And there's obviously a strong correlation we've seen in lots of data. The better you do in language, the better you do in maths. Or if you're just clever, I don't know if the two have a causal relationship. But so that does limit participation for everyone, because some of those children just won't understand the English. And unless we also remember to bring up the English standard of primary school kids especially, they won't necessarily all benefit from participation.
Or we translate.
Or we translate if it's in their own language, but even in own language, your ability to read for understanding is still not great in this country. I mean, our problems are just so many that, but definitely some of the schools have said that there are learners that they wouldn't have thought do well in this kind of a non-routine problems, and then they suddenly, you know, shoot out the lights, and the teacher is surprised. So definitely by giving everyone an opportunity, you find these kids that don't do well in those routine kind of thinking that's part of the curriculum of maths today. And if you suddenly give them this opportunity to do some creative thinking on maths, they show their mettle.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. This discussion has been very rich, and thank you very much then for some last comments there in the chat box. And that is where very few people have access to data, lots of people on WhatsApp. You're absolutely right, Colleen, I agree with you. And we find that the mobile penetration is much higher than internet penetration of the learners, and that's maybe also a vehicle that we'll have to investigate. There's some more opinions from Xavier, the opinion that schools should include programs as part of their learning strategy rather than just a participatory event. I think that's a great remark. And then from Marsha, we also work in a community where there are limitations to resources, and I've found that support for educators through models in life sciences using recyclable materials makes a huge difference. So a lovely other perspective on how we can address these problems. Materials are then distributed to schools for the learners to construct their own models. Thank you very much for that remark as well. That is great. Colleagues, we've come to the end of our session. I really would like to thank our two speakers for your engagement with this topic, as well as your energy and how the commitment that you show towards this process. Thank you very much, participants. Thank you also for just dropping all your comments and questions into the chat box. It makes my job as a session chair so much easier. Thank you to all, and do enjoy the rest of this conference, and then over to all of you to rejoin the other groups then in the other sessions. Have a good afternoon and stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.